year that maybe a light went on for you? Or when you started questioning your beliefs?
I began to awaken to a latent suspicion that perhaps I had been lied to about the Vietnam War, which would mean if I looked at it closely, if I had been deceived and joined the service to fight in a foreign land over a lie, then the moral guilt for my participation was partly on me, but it was also originating from the government that told me that lie. And there's a lot of fascinating history, especially involving Ho Chi Minh and his relationship with U.S. forces in Vietnam during World War II, when Ho Chi Minh fought alongside the U.S. military against the Japanese and was one of our allies. This is a story that 20th century American history repeats again and again. We've created our enemies by trickery and deceitfulness.
Why?
America creates enemies so that the military-industrial complex can keep pumping merchandise and product into a society that is ruled economically by a Federal Reserve and a New York Stock Exchange. The Wall Street bubble, which is what I call it, cannot function without a war ever since World War II.
Or an enemy?
The wars have to have an enemy or you don't have a war. So the question about creating enemies into this probably isn't efficient to your previous question. But in fact, I would like to back up to what we were discussing before we went
You
there.
do whatever you like.
Can you key me again?
Sure. It was also good, but so you started, a light went off 20 years to when you got back from Vietnam.
Yes, I can give you a personal experience as a war veteran. For 20 years after I came home from the war, I didn't think about the war. I didn't talk about the war to my friends. I forgot everything that I could as quickly as I could for protection of my own emotional center. I saw too much over there. I did too much over there. And I didn't want to think about it. So for 20 years, I didn't think about it. But I sat down unexpectedly in a movie theater where Oliver Stone's Platoon was showing. And I had an emotional problem at that point. I was frozen to my chair. When the movie was over, I couldn't get up. I had been transported even to the point that I could smell the air of Vietnam while I'm sitting in this theater. The clothing, the sets, the language, the activity, it brought a 20-year denial home in living technicolor to my very bare soul. When they finally got me to release the grip on the arms of the chair, I ran out to the car. When my date got to the car after me, she found me banging my head on the steering wheel and crying like a baby. And for the next 6 weeks, I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't work. I couldn't even put on my blue jeans. And finally, she forced me to go to a vet center in Memphis, Tennessee. And I sat down in the vet center, and this guy looks at me across the table and says, "You will walk off a job at any time for any reason. You don't care about keeping a job." And I said, "That's right. You can always find another job." He said, "You move around a lot, don't you?" I said, "Yeah, several times a year, in fact." He said, "You can't have a relationship with a woman, can you?" I said, "They just keep going to pieces. I just can't do it." But I said, "How do you know all this about me?" And he wasn't very polite, but he said, "You idiot. There's hundreds of thousands of veterans like you running around America thinking they've got it made. They know what they're doing. They're in charge of their life, and they're just as messed up as you are. You be here for in-country only group sessions starting Tuesday night." And so I stayed at the Vet Center program for a year and a half, going downtown once a week for these sessions, and began to reclaim my soul and my life, and to begin to elevate my conscious awareness of myself so that I could put my life together under terms of my own choosing.
Quick question, these therapy things, the group sessions, therapy group sessions, if they were run by the government, was there still some bullshit to them? Or they were being honest, like this is a freaking ploy? You get my question, right?
The Vet Center was a mixed bag of tricks. They purported to be distinctly separate from the Veterans Administration, and the reason they advertised themselves that way was because many veterans were not being very happy with what they found when they went to the Veterans Administration after they got out of the service. Many veterans were unhappy, so the Vet Center was thought up by the government as an outreach program to induce veterans to come in somewhere and get treatment for this thing they were defining then as PTSD. World War II or Korea, they were calling it shell shock. After Vietnam, it was called PTSD. They wanted the veterans to come get this treatment, but then they would usher you out of the Vet Center program into the VA, and your records of your activities at the Vet Center would be forwarded over to the VA. So the VA was funding the vet centers. At the same time, it was saying we're not a part of the VA, right? So the VA and the vet centers were one and the same, but it was two different faces. One for those who liked the treatment they got at the VA, the other for those of us like myself who didn't want anything to do with the VA.
Tell me when you started, other than that movie of bringing it all back, you really started to explore, for lack of better words, our government. Something wasn't adding up.
From the time that I began to discover myself at the Vet Center programs, I also began to realize the poetic nature that's in my soul was still there, and that I could make of myself what I wanted to make of myself. It had occurred to me then, if the Marine Corps could turn a young Southern gentlemanly poet into a vivid killing machine by mind washing my previous knowledge, my programming, conditioning, I could do that to my mind myself without having to go through the boot camp rigors. By simply choosing the content of my mind, I could make myself into who and what I wanted to be. And I had a keen sense of justice at that point in my life, wanting to be a good person instead of a killing machine or an extension of the force of government. I valued freedom. And so I valued then and I value now freedom. Freedom only comes with responsibility. You have to have a responsibility for the content of your mind and the activities of your deeds. That responsibility to extend no harm to your neighbor or his property in equal proportion to the freedom that you expect from him. You don't want him to aggress you, and you don't want him to aggress your property. So that
Exactly.
mutual understanding is a responsibility that you adopt, and through that adoption of responsibility comes freedom.
Do you think that's something pretty core that you have in common with your friends Ezra and, I'm sorry, with your friends Janae and Ernie?
There are countless types of people who have the same moral ethic. And it do no harm, do as thou wilt. That's a Wiccan phrase for it. The Bible says for Christians, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's all the same thing. It's different linguistic expressions of the same thing. Sensitivity to the beauty and the miracle of life. Sensitivity to the indefinite multitude of the expressions of the being of nature. The trees, the leaves, the insects, the moths and butterflies, the birds, the animals, everything, all of nature is a beautiful miracle. And I remain distracted by that miracle day and night. It's one of the reasons I moved to Montana, right? So my friends are a wonderful and very diverse group of people. I have friends who are Christians. I have friends who are preachers. I have friends who are hippies. I have friends who are beatniks, musicians, artists, sculptors. I have lots of creative-minded friends.
TV producers.
TV producers. I have friends, even TV producers. I don't expect any of my friends to agree with my philosophy, but if they don't have a respect for life and for the beauty in life and for the value, the inherent intrinsic value of a human soul, if they don't have that, they're not my friends. If they have that, I'm thankful for the friendship. And Americans, by and large, remove them from the stresses of the daily grindstone. Remove them from their impassioned embrace of professional sports. Get them away from the TV. Set them down in a natural setting and let them meditate on their own being for a little while. They will find that this same appreciation for goodness and beauty is inside their own hearts. It's in all of us. We're all born with it.
So how does this